Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox 929 on the East Coast and 629 on the West Coast. Viewer discretion is advised for this next story as the final stage of jury selection for the sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs has been postponed, with opening arguments still slated for this coming week. Prosecutors allege the music mogul coerced and abused women for years with help from a network of associates and employees while silencing victims through blackmail, kidnapping, arson, and beatings. They accuse Diddy of using his, quote, power and prestige to force female victims into drugged up, elaborately produced sexual performances with male sex workers in events that were dubbed freak-offs. Diddy's attorneys are expected to argue that the government is demonizing and distorting the sexual activity of consenting adults. Jury selection did begin last Monday, with a federal judge ruling Friday on the postponement of the final phase of selecting that jury, again expected to resume tomorrow. Andrea Lewis is a former felony prosecutor and civil attorney who does handle sex crimes cases. She joins us now live to break all of this down. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so first off, I do want to ask you about the delay. We heard, of course, from the judge on Friday, everything expected to resume tomorrow. So what role does that play in shaking up the timeline? Is there any sort of impact?
It's a minor thing. We're talking about, do they finish picking the jury on Friday as opposed to Monday? The reasons the judge cited for doing that was that he was afraid that if certain jurors were selected, that they may get cold feet over the weekend and have second thoughts and say, you know, maybe this isn't the trial for me. So he just pushed it to Monday. That's not a major inconvenience at all, and I don't think it'll have much effect on the timeline.
A lot of folks have asked about and discussed the sex trafficking aspect of this, but there's also this racketeering statute. So can you break down how it applies to the case and essentially what prosecutors have to prove if they want to secure a conviction?
Sure. So racketeering is a very interesting crime. So what they are really geared at proving is that if the perpetrator engaged in a criminal enterprise. So what does that mean? A criminal enterprise could be something where they're engaging in stealing, fraud, firearm charges, kidnapping, all sorts of things, prostitution, sex crimes. So what it allows the prosecution to do in many cases, even in circumstances where the statute of limitations has run on the underlying crimes, prosecutors can still use those bad acts in many circumstances to prove this larger sort of umbrella crime, if you will, that would encompass all of those underlying crimes. It's used frequently in cases involving gangs. And so that's really what they're trying to do here. And it's a very effective method.
And this is that video that's been seen a lot over the past year or so. What role do these graphic videos, testimonies from alleged victims, including Cassie Ventura, play in the prosecution's case? Because word is that she's expected to testify this coming week, and there's no doubt that video will be played probably several times.
Sure. Well, that video is going to be a key piece of evidence here. And boy, is it damning. Ultimately, what the defense is really trying to do here is they're going to say, look, he's a nice guy. He might not be perfect, but he engaged in these sexual escapades, these freak-offs, as they term them, with other consenting adults. So although it might not be your cup of tea, there's nothing illegal about this. And then you see something like that video, and it's shocking. And it shows this is the nice guy who's engaging in consensual sexual activity. It really looks like there's a lot of force, violence, etc. involved in this. And I think it's really going to give the jury second thoughts if they were even thinking of considering that defense is valid.
Consequences here if the jury does, and again, the jury selection is still underway, so we are weeks away from any potential verdict. But if the jury cannot come up with a unanimous decision, how does all of this work?
So the way it works is it's if the jury ultimately comes in and tells the judge, look, we're stuck. We can't get past this. We can't make it have we can't make a decision here. Then the judge would deem the trial, though he'll call it a mistrial. And what that means is just they couldn't come to a unanimous verdict. What happens in that case, and it's certainly not ideal, no one wants to do the trial all over again. That's very expensive, very time consuming, but that's exactly what would happen is the trial, they would just reschedule it and do it again with a new jury. Sometimes what happens is that the prosecutor may tweak charges, drop charges. Yeah, both sides may bring in new witnesses to tighten up any loose ends on their case, but ultimately it would result in the case being tried again.
Does this case highlight any of the maybe challenges of prosecuting high-profile people in sex trafficking cases? Because you're talking about a man who is very well known and has been well known for decades.
Sure. And I mean, you look at the perfect example here is the list that the judge gave the prospective jurors, which was, as I recall, like hundreds of names, many of whom were famous celebrities, athletes, rappers, people in the music industry. So what happens in circumstances like this is the jurors are asked, is there anything about this case or the person who's on trial or the witnesses who may influence you either way? And if they have a particularly negative feelings towards people that engage in this activity or these celebrities, that could, of course, make it more difficult to get a jury. And on the other hand, if they're like, look, these are my idols, I could never convict if these people were on the stand. Well, they also wouldn't be ideal jurors either.
And that's, of course, the question here is a lot of people have asked how you go about seating a jury when you do have somebody who is so well known and has been for decades. So does that kind of complicate the situation overall with seating a jury? Obviously, the case was not moved to another location. So how does that work?
Well, it absolutely does. And that's in any case where you have people who are this high profile and this well known, coupled with the fact that just recently, it seems like just yesterday, frankly, that video was circulated. That's a lot of people have seen that. They're already having a lot of people report that they know all about the video already and that they have already developed some type of opinions about it, which is no surprise considering the content of the video. But so they are definitely going to have those challenges. And so what they are tasked with now, both sides, is finding a jury who can be fair and impartial. In other words, that does not mean that they haven't previously seen the video or that they don't know people involved. It means that they convince the parties, the attorneys here in the court, that they have not formed an opinion yet of guilt, innocence, or any other relative important issue in this jury or in this trial.
What are we talking about as far as sentencing, legal sentencing, if we do have a conviction here on really any of these charges? What is Diddy actually facing?
Life. He's facing life. And frankly, I think there's a very good chance that he'll get it if he's convicted, given the nature and how long this went on. If the judge, in fact, if the jury renders a verdict for them, and I do think it's very likely that he'll ultimately get life.
Interesting. All right. Well, Andrea Lewis, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and discuss this. Obviously, all eyes are on the case. One thing that's interesting is it's federal court. No cameras are allowed inside, so it makes it a little difficult for folks to gather the information and find out exactly what's going on. My last question here before I let you go, do you think that Diddy will testify? Is there any way to tell one way or another?
Well, only time will tell. If I had to guess, the answer is no. I think he has way too much to lose. And considering the nature of these allegations and the questions that he would be peppered with from the prosecution, I cannot imagine that he would step foot on that stand.
All right. Andrea Lewis, thank you again for taking the time to be here. Anything else you want to add before I let you go?
No, I mean, this is a really interesting case. I think that it really highlights problems that we have as a society, and that people like this who sing about violence and doing bad things to women, that they're glorified. And so, as we see with Harvey Weinstein and the Me Too movement, the tides are turning. And I think that's ultimately very, very good.
All right, Andrea, thank you again for being here. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
And of course, we will have extensive coverage here as jury selection does resume tomorrow. Again, cameras not in court, but Lisa Evers with our Fox 5 New York team will be in that courtroom gathering all of the details, and she'll bring us those updates live here on Live Now from Fox. Also, our very own Mike Page will be on YouTube all throughout the day, bringing us those live updates. So make sure if you are not subscribed to our YouTube that you head there right now. Simply go to YouTube, search Live Now from Fox, and hit that subscribe button.